Hello guys, welcome to the part 2 of the complete shopping cart project, where we are going to be writing the actual Python code for the complete project. So as usual, as we did last week, I'm going to fast forward this part of the code where this part of the video where I'm writing the code. So when I'm done writing the code, then I'm going to start explaining every line of the code from the start to the end for better understanding. I'm sorry it's coming a little bit late. It's due to some reasons beyond my control. And just to reiterate a point before we proceed, please just to reiterate this, that this video is strictly meant for educational purpose. You know, Brigham Young University has a strict CAS honor code of academic honesty. So please, this video is strictly for educational purpose and to help us understand how to write our own code. Thank you. Welcome back, guys. So we are going to be going through this code from the start to the end. So I'll try as much as possible to explain what every line is doing. So we can see from the first line here, this is after the pseudocode. This is where we are starting the Python code. This is where the Python code starts from. Okay, so the first thing we do is to create a list that will contain our menu options. We have 5 menu options. We have add item, view cart, remove item, compute total, or quit. So once we do that, we put all those options inside this list. Then we name it, we store it in a variable called menu list. Then as we go on later in our code, the user will want to shop for items, so we need to keep track of the name of the items they are buying and also the price of that item. So we are going to create two separate lists for that. One to track the name of the item, and the second list to track the price of the items. So once we do that, then we can start our while loop. Why are we using while loop? Because we don't know the number of items that the user is going to buy. If it's a loop that we know when it's going to end, then we can use a for loop. But since we don't know the number of iterations that we are going to run, so the best loop to use is a while loop. So once we enter the loop, we just print this prompt, a welcoming message. Just please enter one of the following, just to prompt the user to enter an option from the menu. So, and once we print this, we display those menu items that we store in this list. And the way we can access those items inside the list is to use a for loop to iterate over those items and display them using this print line. So that's why I wrote this for loop for I in range length of the menu list. So the length of the menu list will give me the length of this list, which is 5. So that 5 will now be passed into this range function. So, and the range function will generate array of numbers between 0 and 5, but excluding 5. So it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what this range method will do. So once we have those numbers, so those numbers will represent the index of each item inside this list: 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that is what this range will do for us. So now we'll print. So we can use this format string to make it look nicer. So the I will represent 0, so we are going to add 1 to make it user friendly, because we don't want to display items for the user starting with 0, 1, 2, 3. Behind the scenes, that's how Python lists it. So we need to make it user friendly by adding 1 to it, so that the first item on the menu will start with 1. So that's why I'm adding this one. So then if we stop, then we just use the index to access the item on the menu list. That's what I'm doing using this square brackets. You know, the item 0 index will give me the first item on the list. So I'm just calling capitalize method on the item so that it will start with capital letter. So that's what that is doing. So once we display the menu items, the next thing is to ask the user to select the action they want to perform. So that's why I'm using this input. I'm calling this input function here, and I'm passing a text inside. Please enter an action. So once the user selects an action, maybe option 1 or option 2 or option 3, I need to convert it into an integer, because that number is going to come in form of a string. So I need to convert that number in form of string to integer type. So once that's why I'm putting it inside this int function. So once I do that, I store it inside this variable called action index. Now we know that for sake of user friendliness, we added 1 to the list of menu when we are displaying it here. Now we need to, for us to have the accurate item that they are selecting on the menu, we need to deduct that 1 so that we can normalize the index. So now once we do that, that's why I'm adding this line: action index equals to action index minus 1. So that will normalize the index back to the right position. So once we do that, we can now, based on the index that the user chooses, we can now perform certain action. So the first thing I'm doing here is to make sure that the index that the user has given me is not out of range, because if we have 5 items on our menu and the user give me number 50, that index is out of range. So if I accept that number like that, the program can crash. So that's why I'm putting this check here, so that if the index is less than the length, the menu list length, so that's why I'm putting this check here. So once I establish that the user has given me a valid index number, then I can now proceed to this part of the code. So I now check which item, which action do they want to perform. So if the action index corresponds to quit, I just print thank you, bye bye, then break the loop, so that, and the program ends. Now if the action index corresponds to add item, so that means the user wants to buy something, so we need to add the name of the item. That is what I'm collecting here with this input method. Then we need to also add the price of the item to the price list. So that is what this other line is doing. So I'm just converting it to floats so that the price can be in form of floating point number. So once I have the name and the price, I can then add them to the list. I'm adding this format method. I'm formatting the floating point number so that it will be in 2 decimal places. That's what I'm doing with this syntax here. So you can if you want 3 decimal places, you can change this to 3, like so. But I want 2 decimal places according to the requirement of the program. So you just call format and pass in that floating point number. Now so once we do that, we add the item name to the name list, to the item list, then we add the item price to the price list. So once we do that, we just give the user a feedback that the item has been added. So that's that for adding item. That's all for adding item. Now for to view carts, if the action index corresponds to view carts, that is the user wants to view the things they have bought so far. So what we need to do is to display the items in both the item list and the price list. So what I need to do, instead of me to write two different loops to loop over the item list and the price list, I just write just a single loop using this range, because I know for a fact that the number of items in the price list is going to be the same number of items in the item list, because once a user buys something, I'm storing both the names and the price in two different lists, so they are going to have the same length. So I can use the length of any of them to loop through over the two lists. So I just need to generate the range of one of the lists. So I'm using item list. So once I have the range, that range is also going to work for the second list too. So I pick each index, each item on the item list. I pick it and select and put it inside this variable called item. Then each price in the price list, I select it and put it inside this variable called price. Now I have the item and the price for each list. Now what I need to do is just to print it in a user-friendly manner by using this format string syntax. So this one will give me the number of the item, then the item and the price. So that's how I displayed the items in the cart. Now if the action index corresponds to compute total, that means the user wants to know the total cost of the things they have bought so far. So what I need to do is to initialize a variable and create a variable and initialize it, assign 0 to it at first. So because we want to add up all the things in the item list. So once I create this variable, I start with 0. I loop over the price list and add every price in the price list. I just continue to add them to this cart total, so that by the time I will go through the first price in the price list, I'm going to add it. The second price, I will add it, so like so, until I get to the end of the price list. So once I'm done, everything will be added to this cart total, and I'm going to format it nicely to 2 decimal places and put it into this variable called formatted cart total. So once I format it nicely, I can then print it out for the user. So that's that for that. And but if none of this happens, maybe the user, okay, once we do that, we are done with computing the total. But if the action index is to remove item, maybe the user wants to remove something in the cart. Now the way we do that is just to, once we ask for the number, we ask for the number of the item they want to remove. Then as usual, we need to